Howdy y'all, I am Ice Gold, and some of you may remember back in November when I made a video titled Wizard101's Balance Problem. In it, I just talked about the balance school, so the title wasn't totally clickbait, but it definitely worked. Anyway, I did it again. When I was trying to record Storm PvP for yesterday's video, I wanted to have more than, one match for the video, but after getting to death, we played astronomically worse and still won, because Wiz, I got this fella. And let me tell you, he has everything wrong with the balance school right now. He is a 1400 who found an extremely cheesy way to play and then added even more cheese to it. Anyway, that match was the inspiration for a video I'll make probably late next week where I talk about how I would nerf every single balance spell, because goddamn it needs to happen. On round 1, he made a move that I found to be super odd at the time. He cast a Spirit Shield. I was very obviously a Storm, as shown by the health, and had Stitch. I don't exactly have a Mugsy robe for my Who Now robe yet, but I was perplexed as to why he put on a Tri-Shield to 3 schools I straight up do not use. On round 2, I caught on to what he was doing. He used the Scorpion to swap the Life Shield from the Spirit Shield over to me because he intended to abuse Hydra off of it forever. Hydra, for those unaware, is one of the most overpowered spells in the game right now, and one of the most overpowered spells in all of Wiz history. It echoes up to 3 shields on the target back onto the caster in the form of 35% universal shields, and then does 230 fire, then 230 ice, then 230 storm damage back to back to back. For 6 pips. Of course, you probably see the problems with it now. If you elemental shield to block out some of the absurd damage it does, the balance will get 3 35% universal shields back, which is extremely hard for many schools to handle, as those overtimes can only break up to 2 of them in one turn, making Hydra the ultimate combo stopper. If you do try to use an overtime, they probably just Gearhead you anyway, but more on that later. Fire could deal with it a bit better, but Hydra melts them through shields anyway. So, I mean, if you tower shields so they don't get as many shields, the ice and storm heads will do full damage, totaling out at around 1500, and the balance is also then protected from a hit. If you don't shield at all, because you don't want the balance to get shields, you then take full damage, which on a storm totals out to around 2000 with no buffs. There is one spell that could actually help with this, other than weakness, but I'll get to that in a bit. There is no counterplay to this. Hydra is far above balance's DPP, and the devs know it actually. The spell is actually getting nerfed pretty soon, so that it'll echo after the hit, and hopefully boost some damage too. But this guy's strategy, I mean, not even a nerf like that will fix it. On round 3, he used Adapt so he could get a power pit back for every time he used Hydra for the rest of the match, effectively allowing him to spam 2000 damage for 4 pips. Don't think I need to mention why that's bad. But back to the Scorpion thing. Because the Scorpion swapped shield that Hydra doesn't break over to me, he can now force me to have a shield on at all times so that he can incessantly spam Hydra under an Adapt, because there was nothing I could do as a Storm to get a shield off of myself. I mentioned that one of the ways to play around Hydra was to not shield so they didn't get shields back, but because he's a balance wizard, he had the ability to take even that avenue away from me. Even though Hydra desperately needs this upcoming nerf, it's really not even Hydra that I have the bigger problem with here. I find myself asking the devs to rework a level 5 spell that does negligible damage that I never thought could be this stupid, because it wasn't something I thought was so busted up until now. Scorpion needs to echo one shield rather than swap, because as long as it swaps shields, they can nerf Hydra however they want, but it'll still be overpowered due to the echo mechanic, whether it happens before or after the hit, because that leftover life shield that a lot of schools can't take off is gonna be on the target permanently. I'm sure something like this was not intended when the devs were making the Arc 1 spellnets and all that, so if they could just turn Scorpion into an echo, I'm sure everybody would love that. The rest of that match went really about as you'd expect. I actually had some really good pulls. I got L's when I needed them, so I was able to create good pressure, but I was no match for a barrage of 2k damage hits that also shielded the caster while giving him 2 pips back every time. I'll go on and say that if this ever becomes the meta strat for balances, and at this point I don't see why it wouldn't, because there's already no counterplay, and making the strat even more overpowered seems like something people will want to do, then I'll consider this meta to be just as bad as the week where Fire Shark was a thing. And what did we do when it was a thing? We stopped queuing. And I would encourage everyone watching to do exactly that. What's crazier though is that despite everything, there was a pathway to victory. Well, there would have been if one specific spell didn't exist. I am talking about Supernova, the spell that costs 2 pips to do more than 1000 damage and pops the target's aura. I get bubble for most of the match, and my catch of the day blades were super helpful in doing a ton of damage to the guy, but if I'd been able to use my galvanic fields to not only deal a lot more damage but also build up more pips to combo with, I may have been able to pull it off because I did actually bring him close, even though it was Storm versus Balance and he was doing a super cringe strat. Problem is, like I said earlier, Supernova's existence makes using any kind of aura against a Balance a horrible move. If I carried Brace, it definitely could help me withstand maybe one more Hydra, but one aura pop is all he would have needed to make that damage loss up and get ahead by even more. I want this spell to be banned, taken out of the game, forcibly removed, whatever you want to call it. Aura Destruction, even without the damage, makes Balance just so much better compared to every other school, but being able to do as much damage as they do for 2 pips, it's completely insane. It's not healthy for the meta when spells like Brace, that would help so much against a card as absurd as Hydra, are not even on the table because using Brace would allow the very same school spamming said Hydras to get another free 1000 plus damage. Auras are a very valuable mechanic in PvP and would be especially good for defeating Balance Wizards, so why do they still have a cop-out card dedicated to nuking them being allowed in the arena? Never mind the fact that every Balance Wizard carries max braces because it's a free 4-turn Pierce Sponge that allows them to not have to abide by the current combat model of quote-unquote every school kills every school in the same number of hits, since if someone tries to use a brace against them, they just pop it for 1000 damage. The next spell I want to talk about is Gearhead Destroyer. It wasn't relevant in the match I've been talking about in this video, but its existence is why Ice versus Balance is fundamentally unwinnable for the Ice. Gearhead shifts a damage over time and steals a heal over time while breaking a shield or a weakness all at once for 4 pips, and it does honestly a lot of damage to boot if it's not into a shield. A spell like this is, as you could guess, extremely busted, not only because it straight up shifts a ton of damage back to the person casting in overtime, or is the main source of healing against life. I've seen people Gearhead or regenerate twice and it was worth doing, but because it also removes the impending damage from the balance or the impending heal from the life. I could talk at length about how shift needs to, not exist, that's why I can't band it, but what it basically boils down to in this instance is Gearhead removes the last avenue for some schools to take when facing a balance. You can't go for a gambit without getting mana burn, you can't set up a gambit without getting Hydra or Ide or whatever. You can't go for a high pip hit without getting mana burns. You can't combo without getting mana burned, you can't aura without getting supernova, you can't blade without getting scarabed, and you can't shield without getting Hydra or Scorpion, as I've talked about earlier. And as a solid source of damage and utility for a number of schools, you can't overtime without getting gearheaded. A lot of schools have ways to beat balance, but not Ice, and this spell is why. If it could echo a damage over time and heal over time, that would be good, as it would become a solid pressure card for balances to use. It would be a good reactive spell that they could keep. The final card that I'm going to talk about in this video specifically is Mana Burn. This card has really almost never not been a problem. Pip Destruction is pretty whack, but it's certainly not what it used to be. It does far less damage and destroys the intended number of pips now, which made it relatively balanced back in 2020 when the game was good, because you could keep your pips low and still do damage. There was counterplay to it, arguably more back when it deleted up to 6 pips and did way more damage compared to today. That's because with shadow hits now costing 2 shadow pips to cast, the meta has been centered around gambits, and a lot of us have problems with those. It's not the end of the world though, because there's a lot of gambits every school can use, and there's some diversity in terms of strats. But that being said, they all cost a lot of pips to use, and Mana Burn really seems to be the proverbial cat with 9 lives. Every time it gets nerfed, we think it'll be fine, but then one meta change later, and it is back to being so obnoxious that people pack max copies of it because of how strong it is. The main reason why this card needs yet another nerf is because Pip Destruction being exclusive to the school that already has everything else in a meta where you need a lot of pips to do damage is pretty absurd. I wouldn't say I have much of a problem with the damage per pip burned at the moment. It seems to be in an okay state and has become more of a chip card, but this is honestly one of the biggest reasons why balance is far and away the best school at not only max level, but also exalted PvP, as I know firsthand. And I think it's funny how in the two brackets where the card can be used, the school wielding it is fundamentally better than everyone else. I think I'd rebalance this card by increasing the damage back to 80 per pip burned and removing the pip destruction mechanic. I know that's a hot take to some, but hey. It needs to still be a card that balances can threaten without being broken, like when people literally just empower turn 1 and then just burn, empower, and so on for entire matches. Adopting this change would create counterplay while also keeping the card sufficiently strong. It'll still be tougher to go for gambits with a damage increase because the threat of taking too much damage back to back will certainly be there, but you'll also be able to still go for the gambits in the end, just at the cost of some health. It wouldn't be a stalling card anymore, and people would still want to keep their pips low out of, fear of taking too much damage from it, which, in my honest opinion, is a happy ending for everyone. But anyway, this is just my take on the whole thing. I'll probably make a video late next week going more in depth with my solutions to all the problems I have with balance right now, because there's truthfully no use ranting about problems without providing solutions, and that'll be the main point of that future video. So I hope y'all stay tuned for that. I'm aiming for next Friday with that. Got to brainstorm, because there's just so much about balance that is just insane right now. But I don't know, I'll see what I want to say in that video. So thank y'all for watching. I've been Ice Gold. Be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 comments for the algorithm. My Discord is down in the description if you want to chat with me some more, and I will see y'all